to, just so everybody can see this. If you don't play college football as much as Nico and myself, you might not be as familiar with the bracket, but I have it up on the screen now if you're watching on YouTube. If not, go check it out. Top 4 seeds, which are supposed to be for the Power 4 conference champions, will get a bye into the quarterfinals. First round is being played at the higher seeds location. So 8 seed will host, 6 seed, 7 seed, and 5 seed is supposed to be the one highest ranked group of 5 conference champion. That is how it will all be shaking out. Before we get into who's on the bracket, let's go ahead and look at the standings. I'll get those pulled up. Where do we want to start? I'll let you pick the conference that we want to start by looking at the standings.
Let's just do alphabetically and pick the big 4 / we can have the conversation about Boise State 2 again as well in this conversation, because I think the big 4 and go alphabetically with the ACC.
All right, we're starting with ACC. I'm pulling up the standings now. As it sits, it would be Miami versus SMU. Neither of those teams play each other for the remainder of their schedule. I believe Miami might have Pitt left, and SMU will have Clemson or Louisville. I can't remember which one, but those are the 2 that seem to be separating themselves. I know that SMU has more fame for like the Jim Craig and the Eric Dickerson, the death penalty era. The Pony Express 30 for 30 is legendary. This is not necessarily that level of team, but this SMU team is good enough to play with the ACC especially. Are they good enough to not let Cam Ward put on a Superman cape and beat them? That remains to be seen, but I think that would be an interesting matchup because it's at least a new brand that we haven't seen in this conference championship matchup, and a brand that we haven't seen. I looked it up. The last time that Miami was in the conference championship game was 2018 when they got beat by, I think, 30 by Clemson. That was the last time that Miami has been relevant. So Mario Cristobal trying to do something that hasn't been done at Miami for a long time. So the SMU, are you looking at another team that will sneak into the ACC championship now that you see the standings, or are those the 2 that you're picking?
I think Clemson would be the one. If I'm being honest with you, I think if SMU does falter against anyone, and maybe you can look this up while I'm talking about this. If SMU plays Clemson, I would expect Clemson win, to be honest with you. Like I said, SMU is a team that's very, very solid, but I'd expect Cade Klubnik and Dabo to win that big-time matchup. So I would expect almost a Clemson versus Miami ACC championship. But frankly, like I don't see how Miami isn't the one representing this conference. They've been the most consistent. They've been the team that has they've had a few setbacks in DNA games, but they've closed out and clobbered bad teams. I'd find it very, very surprising if it wasn't Cam Ward and Miami representing. I'm not going to call this a Cam Newton esque season that Cam Ward is on, because yes, the names are similar and the play style is kind of similar too. Big arm that can run as well. But I think Cam Ward is securing himself as being a staple in college football lore, and I don't see another team knocking on that door, frankly. And I'd expect Miami to be not only in the playoff but be a team with a first round bye.
So looking at SMU, the remaining schedule, they have Boston College this weekend at home. Boston College has been feisty, so if they're going to slip up, it would be that one. Then they finish at Virginia and then home against Cal. Their resume up until this point, their one loss on the season is to BYU, week 3 by 3 points. So if anybody is rooting for BYU to finish their season and finish in the Big 12 championship, possibly as a conference champion, it would be SMU, because that would give them the possibility. I mean, if they find themselves in this game, I think that they have a shot at an at-large, because then they're going to be top 15, and who knows?
Every team that makes a conference championship this year has a very, very good chance. That's why
I think makes a conference championship with one loss. With one loss, I think if you make it with 2, you got to win and you're in. But if you make it with 1 and you lose, there's a chance for the at-large. I think that, I mean, you're going to see it in a little bit. I picked SMU and Miami to be playing in this game, and I did have Miami beating them just because I think it's not this weekend, this game, that I don't trust Cam Ward. I have Cam Ward falling and Miami falling a couple weeks later on in the playoff. But the ACC with those 2 teams, I think that conference championship game will at least produce points. That's one thing that we can say. Next up is the Big 12. Looking at it, we've already kind of talked about it since CU is in the mix. BYU currently at the top, and then a 2-way tie between Iowa State and Colorado with 4-1 conference records. Technically, Iowa State does have the better overall record, but they will play Kansas State coming up to finish off their season. So one of those two teams will be both of those two teams will knock one or the other out. There's not another team that's going to sneak in, I don't think. But of those top 4 teams, is BYU the one that you trust the least? I know that you probably haven't seen as many BYU games because they're a little bit more like they're still kind of played in the Pac-12 and the Mountain West time slots on TV. But is that the team that you trust the least?
I mean, based upon what you've told me with BYU and their strengths of schedule and who they've beaten, like I don't hate that at all. I do think that they probably have the easiest path left to the Big 12 championship. Utah, obviously, we said not very, very good. Kansas has struggled this year. Arizona State has had a couple of good games, but have struggled as well. That's probably the toughest game left. And Houston has been a laughingstock and is so far as well in the Big 12 schedule. So I think that BYU will be in the Big 12 championship based upon who they play left and them taking care of business. I'll go on a limb here. I think CU does make this Big 12 championship. I really do think that Iowa State and Kansas State are going to knock each other out, and I think that could hurt both resumes. And CU has a backdoor shot at getting in, whether they beat BYU or not. That's a great question to be determined. But I do think that BYU or CU could get into that conversation. Absolutely. So. And frankly, if they get to that Big 12 championship, this isn't like the year. I can't remember the exact year. It might have been 2017.
It was 2017.
2017 when they made the Pac-12 championship, where they just got obliterated to smithereens by Washington.
By Jake Browning, quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals and Washington quarterback.
They got blown to smithereens. I think that they have a much better chance this year than that year. Obviously, talent-wise, is way different. It's way better off. But I think they have a much better chance of sneaking their way into a position where they win the Big 12 championship in their first year return. So, I'm full aboard the CU Buff train, obviously, but it's not unrealistic anymore, especially after what happened this past week. It's not unrealistic.
Yeah, it'll be. I have Iowa State coming out of the Big 12, but the one thing I did want to mention, this would be CU's first Big 12 championship appearance, I believe, since 2005, because they lost to Vince Young, or maybe it was 2006 when they played that game. And it will be BYU's first time ever in the Big 12 championship after being in the Mount West for so long. By the way, that is a sneaky rivalry game. BYU and Utah hate each other.
Absolutely.
So even if Utah isn't that great, I think that it's still going to be worth watching. It is in Utah, so it's in Salt Lake City. It is not in BYU. Going on the road in college football, and Utah is going to play this game at night. So Utah at night, weird things happen. BYU not necessarily a shoo-in, but right now, I do have them holding in and losing to Iowa State in the Big 12 championship with my predictions. So I have for ACC, I did pick Miami as the conference champion. For the Big 12, I picked Iowa State. You have CU, you have Miami. Moving forward, we have the new and gigantic Big 10. It's no longer just 10 teams, if you weren't aware. If this is your first time talking about college football, welcome everybody. Indiana sits atop this conference because they have the extra win week 0. They are 9-0 overall, have the best point differential in the country, 419, and only allowed 123, won every game by double digits. And like I said, only trailed for, I think, 10 minutes of the entire season so far. Kirk Cignetti has done what nobody thought was possible at Indiana. The only thing that I'm worried about, obviously, if they slip up, that game against Ohio State is a huge moment. The good thing is that all of these guys are not from Indiana, so it's not like they've been a program that you've turned around. This is a program that had no history and then got transfers at literally every position. We talked about Dion being a transfer portal merchant. If you turn on an Indiana game, every single player who makes a play and transfer from this Power 5 school, transfer from Miami, transfer from Florida State, like Cignetti is a big game hunter in the transfer portal, and it shows. I think that's going to be actually an X factor in their favor because this is not an Indiana team who's always been bad. This is a bunch of guys in the group of 5 that are getting their first chance to prove themselves. Maybe it's too big of a stage, but it's not going to be because of the history. You at least don't have to deal with any kind of curse.
And to alter this differently from CU's model of transfer portal this, transfer portal that, and basically reinventing a whole team. Cignetti is different from Dion in the fact that he coached a one of the James Madison school into a conversation where they were a top 10 team in the country. Let's not forget. Obviously, they didn't finish that way, but no offense to Jacksonville State and what Deion was doing, they were not playing very, very good football teams. And James Madison was playing these big time schools and running their conference into the ground. So it's a little bit more different in that sense of things. So he's a little bit more of a gamer when it comes to big games as opposed to Deion yet. Obviously, we'll see if that changes for CU and Deion. But he has done a fantastic job with this program. I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, though, because I'm sorry. I don't see them being Ohio State at the shoe. I can't. I think that they could get a chance at an at-large bid because I think Big Ten could have 3 or 4 schools where they're one of the final teams in for Indiana. I don't think that they beat Ohio State. I'm sorry. I think they beat Michigan. Michigan has been very, very poor this upcoming weekend. But going into the shoe, I pick Ohio State there, and I think it's Ohio State-Oregon rematch for the Big Ten championship, frankly. And I think that's a game that we're all licking our chops at. And look, this is no slight to Indiana because I think they're outplaying themselves right now. Like they're like, holy shit, this is fun. Like I have a lot of friends that obviously with Jeremy and people I've met through Jeremy in Indiana that are just ecstatic. And I think if they could somehow make it a close game against Ohio State, it's a fucking win. It's an absolute win because if you beat Michigan, you lose to Ohio State, and you beat Purdue at the end of the year, Indiana with 1 loss, and that 1 loss being Ohio State should be in the college football playoff. I will stand on that. I think you'll agree with me here, Jimmy.
I have Indiana in the playoff. That's for sure.
I just don't think that they'll be in the Big Ten championship unless there's a weird tiebreaker where they have the tiebreaker over Oregon because Oregon loses or something. I don't know how all that works and where the tiebreakers come in for teams that don't play each other. I think it is Oregon versus Ohio State rematch in the Big Ten championship. And frankly, I think Oregon's been one of the best teams in the country and a team that I've been very, very impressed with all season long, especially what Gabriel has done with Lanning and company. So I'll pick Oregon to be honestly the number 1 team in the country. I think going into the playoff and hosting and having a first round bye.
When I was making these predictions, the conference championship, that the seeds that I assigned to them, I put Big Ten with Oregon. That's who I picked as the conference champion. I have them beating Indiana in the conference championship game because I do. I put the title that I put for this week on the screen for a reason. Indiana fans, cover your ears. Jeremy, don't listen to me right now because it's been bad the last few weeks. But I am giving them the benefit of the doubt that they will be in the Big Ten championship as of now, and I have them losing to Oregon. That means beating Ohio State and beating Purdue, and they go into this thing undefeated, and they lose in the Big Ten championship, which drops them in my predictions to a 6 seed. So they still get to host a playoff game in Bloomingdale. They would be hosting BYU, who lost in my Big 12 championship. So I'll go through all of these again. I also put score predictions. That's how much I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I normally only get brackets for wrestling. Now I get brackets for football too. This is like candy for me. All right. We got to keep moving. Last of the Power 4 conferences that we need to look at. It is where the big boys play. This is where the big boys play. That's all I can think about when I think of the SEC, especially with the Turner and the Georgia ties. Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Texas, because and LSU all have 1 conference loss. So there's a lot of congestion at the top. Georgia has been handling their business since their loss to Alabama, still top 5 in the country, top 3. They're number 3 right now from the College Football Playoff Committee. Carson Beck, you got to think that with as talented and with as much expectation, as much hype, and people who have been talking about him and we're calling him the number 1 quarterback in this class at the beginning of the season aren't dumb. Like, it's not like they were a whole bunch of idiots that didn't know what they were talking about. This is out of character. Nobody expected this. I liken it back to, you remember when Matt Barkley went back to USC after his killer junior season, and everybody's like, oh, it's written in the stars, he's going to go on and they're going to be undefeated, and it just didn't happen. Carson Beck's having that kind of season. I don't think that he could have declared last year, but he's just not playing very well. But Georgia is finding ways to overcome, and the X factor for the Bulldogs is Kirby Smart. He is the new standard of college coaching. Unless Cignetti can do what people are predicting this season, he is the guy that you have to look up to. He is he's not Palpatine, he's Darth Vader. He's not the leader. He did not build the empire, but he is the right hand, and he is the most feared person right now to be staring at in the conference championship game.
Absolutely, and I think Georgia at this point is a shoo-in to be in the SEC championship, and I think that they'll just beat up some bad teams. Looking at obviously the top of this SEC conference, it is such a clutterfuck. It is wild. It is wild just because obviously only one of these teams is going to have a bye, and when you do that, it's going to play into a lot of factors here. And I want to get your take on this because I was just thinking about this as you're talking about this. Is like, is Alabama a team that's on the outside looking in?
I'm glad you brought that up because I have them as my first team out.
That's a wild thing to think about because obviously they play Mercer, they play Auburn, who's a bad team, and they play another bad team. Obviously, they're not going to be in the SEC championship. That's out of the picture unless something crazy happens these last 3 weeks. So is it like I looking at this picture? I mean, look, Tennessee could fall badly, but I think Tennessee obviously has a win over Alabama. So
Tennessee and Georgia play, so not this weekend, but next weekend. Tennessee and Georgia will play.
So that may knock Tennessee down a little bit further if Georgia is able to win that. But if Tennessee can beat Georgia, I mean, we may be singing Rocky Top instead of doing the salute for Texas A&M here.
Here's the craziest thing: is that even if one of those two teams have to play each other, one of them will get knocked down. If LSU or Texas A&M finish out their schedule, or Ole Miss right now, because I think Ole Miss has the tiebreakers over Bama, they would still be left out of the conference championship game. That is, they need a lot of chaos, and they still need to handle their business, which Bama's looked better, but Kalen DeBoer has not figured that thing out all the way. I don't necessarily know if he wants to be. It might be better for them to finish the season and win out and, handle your business and then be that first team out, because then you can, like Georgia last year. Oh, well, if we would have been in the 14 playoff, we would have dominated everybody. We had one loss on our season, and that's the only team who's beaten us for the last 4 years. It's funny that you bring that up because I did have Bama. I have Bama, Tennessee, Texas A&M, LSU, and Ole Miss as my 5 teams that are out because they were the ones that were ranked high enough. But it's going to be they got to play each other.
So you're saying SEC will get 3 or 4?
The conference that had the most was the Big Ten. I have Oregon, Indiana, Penn State, and Ohio State in from the Big Ten. Ohio, like I was saying, this week was difficult for me finding the last seeds because there's so many games that are still yet to take place. But I don't know if that'll work out the way that I have it or not. I had Texas from the SEC. I have Georgia, and that looks like it looks like it's it. It's just 2.
I'm in a standpoint of where I seriously think that a Big 12 champion and an ACC champion, you have to win your conference at this point to get in. I'll keep it a buck because I look at how cluttered this top of the SEC is, and we talked about how cluttered the top of the Big Ten is. I think that the committee, because they already showed us this past weekend that resumes don't mean a fuck. If you have the logo, that's all that matters. They've already proven that. If you're telling me that BYU loses the Big 12 championship, say to Iowa State or to CU, whatever, I think that there's a converation they have that Alabama goes in over BYU.
This is my thoughts. Like now that you point that out, I'm seeing this in the lens that they're supposed to be using. Like, and that's why I'm doing a new bracket for each week because it's supposed to be a snapshot of where you are at this point in the season. Doesn't matter what the fuck happened the rest of the season. Who are the best teams at this point, week 11 of the college football season? That's obviously not what's going on. The College Football Playoff Committee. I'm open if you guys want to start paying me a salary and I can be in the committee room and I can tell everybody, no, take away. Stop looking at the helmet. Don't look at the helmet. Look at the product. Look at the product. Just look at the product. The product is amazing this season.
Look, obviously we are very, very far away from this picture being even close to being done. We are. Like I said, until the conference championships completely happen, where we actually know the top 4 is when we can officially be like, hey, this team should be in, this team should be out, where we can truly compare resumes entirely to a point. But right now, just seeing everything at the top of the SEC and the top of the Big Ten, I think there's a situation where the SEC and the Big Ten could get 4 each, and
that would
that'd be
piss a
wild.
lot of people off.
That pissed a lot of people off. But based upon what they did, I don't think that based upon what they did after these first rankings, and obviously we're taking these rankings with a grain of salt because it's the very, very first ones, and things change from now until the end of the year. But I think that's a real possibility that we're going to have to talk about here in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah. Let's go through. I'll put all my predictions out there. I'm going to start with my 4 teams that got buys and where I seeded them. So I have the Big Ten champion at the 1 seed. That is Oregon, finishing their undefeated season behind Dylan Gabriel. I have Georgia as a 1-loss SEC champion at the 2 seed. I put Miami as the 3 seed because they would be undefeated in my scenario. I don't think that they would put them as a 4. And Iowa State, since they have it. And Iowa State is another team. I know that they lost last weekend. If they didn't, they would be in this conversation of why are they so disrespected? They're undefeated, blah, blah, blah. But obviously they have the 1 loss now. But they're Big 12 champion. I did not have CU on my bracket. I didn't want to take it that far. I'm a mush. So CU fans, you don't want me to tell you that CU is going to be on the bracket with 3 weeks and the Army-Navy game still upcoming. Those are my conference champions. I have my 5 seed was Boise, with a 1-loss Mountain West championship behind Ashton Genty, finalist for the Heisman Trophy. My 6 seed was Indiana after losing to Oregon in the Big Ten championship. 7 seed was Notre Dame, just because they don't have the conference championship game, so they're always going to be likely to make the bracket and host a playoff game. 8 seed was Penn State, because they get the benefit of not playing a conference championship game and picking up another loss after their loss to Ohio State. My 9 was Texas. That means that Penn State and Texas would play in Happy Valley. My 10 seed was Ohio State, so they played Notre Dame. My 11 was BYU going to Bloomingdale to play Indiana, and SMU out of the ACC plays Boise in Idaho for the 12-5 matchup.
I don't hate that. I don't hate that. I'm not going to go into depth for 5 through 12. I will say who I think gets the buys. I have Oregon and Georgia as well. I have Oregon and Georgia. Well, I also have Miami. And you know what? I'll take the bait. Boise State has a first round bye. I'll take the bait because the way I see it, if CU wins, they'll be in the playoff. Obviously, I have CU winning the Big 12 championship, and frankly, if Kansas State or one of these 2-loss teams gets in, I think there's a conversation of Boise State being the 4th bye. I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious when I say this because they play the Mountain West. Maybe look, I may be. I'm
gonna look up. I'm just gonna look up and make sure that there's not a rule that states that can't happen because that's what everybody's been predicting.
Well, based upon the video game, I've been a Mountain West school with my Lopes and had a bye. So I just think that it's possible. So that could change it that way, and it's not held to these Power 4 teams. But I seriously think that Boise State will have a bye.
Field will consist of top 5 conference champions as ranked by the College Football Playoff Committee, as well as the next 7 highest ranked at-large schools. Top 4 conference champions. Okay, so it is just top 4 conference champions. Okay.
And the way I'm pointing it out is I'm having CU beat BYU, right? CU beat BYU in the Big 12 championship, and CU would be your
5 seed.
They will be my whatever if that goes 5 seed. I don't know how they.
That would be because conference champions have to be 1 through 5. So CU would be 5 seed. BYU or Boise would move into your 4 seed. So we would have a playoff game at Folsom Field.
Boise State has a hell of a resume. Okay, like I said, they've beaten some bad teams, and I understand that I'm sugarcoating the Mountain West because the Mountain West is pretty ass this year too. But
CSU is number 2 in the Mountain West right now,
and they're not good either. So Boise State has ran the table, and they will run the table all the way through. I just think that. I mean, this is the whole conversation that we've had the last couple of years with Cincinnati when they're in the the American, and then UCF as well when they're in whatever conference into the Final Four.
Also the American.
We were like, they have 1 loss, and it's to a top 4 team. Like we were like, they should get in, they should get in. I think that conversation has changed, especially after was it Cincinnati 2 years ago now with Desmond? Maybe it was 3 years now. 3 years ago, where they realized, you know what? Even if you're not a Power 4 now, Big 4 conference champion, you still have a very, very good shot of being one of the best teams in the country. And I think that they proved that with Cincinnati. I think they absolutely proved that with Cincinnati. So why the hell would they not? Why the hell not? Especially if Oregon is the number 1 team in the country. Especially.
No, I think that there's the conversation. There's similar conversations, but they obviously do shift with the new things that are happening. For my matchups, I had SMU as the 12 seed, upsetting Boise in Idaho, so they move on to play Iowa
That's a
State.
fun game, by the way.
That it would
That's
be
a,
it would be fun because it's
that
on the
is
blue
a
turf.
that is a college football sicko type of game. You're like, fuck yeah, SMU versus Boise State. Hell yeah.
Sometimes I just like to make doomsday scenarios.
That is fucking Michigan State versus North Carolina in college basketball. You're like, man, this is just fucking grittiness. Tom Izzo versus the Tar Heels. Fuck yeah. Where it's not going to be pretty basketball, probably not the best talent on the field of every single other playoff game, but you know it's going to be an exciting game.
Yeah, I have that score 35-17 in favor of SMU because I think that, once the ponies get running, it's hard to get them to stop. I have Penn State over Texas in the 8-9 matchup. BYU loses to Indiana. I have Indiana making a statement as the 6th seed, 38-10 over the Cougars. And then I have Ohio State beating Notre Dame by 3 in the 10-7. So matchups in my quarterfinals are SMU versus Iowa State, Penn State versus Oregon, Indiana versus Miami, and Ohio State versus Georgia.
And there's no rebracketing, right? So like
there is no rebracketing. So the winner of the 11-6 plays the 3, the winner of the 10-7 plays the 2, 8-9 plays the 1, and the 12-5 plays the 4.
Gotcha. That's interesting. That's definitely interesting.
My semifinal, you ready for this? First week 11 prediction for semifinal, Iowa State and Oregon. I have Iowa State beating SMU. I don't think that the ponies can make it 2 in a row. And then I have Indiana playing Georgia in the other side.
Oh boy. So Oregon, Georgia's your final, or do you have Indiana going on a miracle run? A miracle run. A miracle run. Okay.
Takes on Indiana, the 6th seed, Indiana behind Kirk Cignetti. You know what? When I was thinking about this, I was putting in my mind past scenarios, and what kept popping up: TCU. Nobody thought they could beat Michigan in the semi, make the playoff, and make it to the national championship, but they ran out of steam. And I have Oregon winning the national championship as of now in week 11. So they beat Indiana, the Hoosiers, number 2 in the country, after beating. By the way, I have that as a very close game. That would definitely be like last-second field goal. I had it 38-35. The other side, I have Oregon stomping on Iowa State 42-20.
Yeah, I mean it's. I don't know if I have Indiana going.
It's going to be change. It's going to change every single week. That's the beauty of it.
Jeremy's going to love you to death. That's all I'm going to say.
Next week, Texas A&M. I'm going to show you guys that next week how Texas A&M makes the final.
Oh man, this is. All I'll say is this: I'll wait and see. I don't know if I believe in it. If Indiana beats Ohio State, then I'll start believing.
And that does have to happen for this scenario. They
at the shoe also. Let's not forget at the shoe. So
I almost seeded it. I almost seeded it where they had the rematch right in the first round, where it would take place in Indiana, because that would be kind of fun to see. Well, Ohio State goes, oh well, you beat us on the road, and then Kirk Cignetti goes, yeah, and we beat you at home too. Google me, I win. It'll be fun to see how that shakes out. I'll bring back new